that don't know, I live just down the street, so I consider Palmer my home school. I have the good fortune on my exercise routine to jog by. Usually I'll go down Tejon and I'll come back on either Weber or Wasatch. And if I time it right, I either get to see the melee of the drop-off for buses and cars, or I get to see what I call the stragglers, which are the kids that are coming in 7:40, 7:45, kind of making their way down. But it's great to be here. I live downtown on purpose because I believe that many of the challenges we have in District 11 are similar to other urban systems that I have worked with, and living downtown reminds me every day of what both those challenges and opportunities are. So I consider Palmer to be my home school. I'm excited to be here. I normally would go through about 15 or 20 minutes of things to talk about and then open it up to Q&A. We'll just go straight to Q&A because it's such a small group. I think we can have the advantage of time and have some intimate conversation. I did just want to remind everybody for a moment, she's walking away as I'm walking towards her. Our host for the evening, Principal Disney, has announced her retirement, and it has come to my attention that she started here at Palmer in 2005 as an assistant principal. And so, of course, I played that game that said what was happening in 2005, and the average price for a gallon of gas was $3.18, which is kind of about what it is now. It's not that much more. And there was a massive ice storm that paralyzed the country, which at least yesterday felt like we had a pretty hefty snowstorm that paralyzed the city. But really, the takeaway event from 2005 was Hurricane Katrina. For those of you who have anybody who've lived in the New Orleans area, it was not just a storm that a city had to recover from. It was a storm that changed the landscape of a city, and particularly its educational plans going forward. I have had the good fortune of working with who at the time was the state superintendent, John White, for the state of Louisiana, on how it was that the city of New Orleans would think about what they would do for public education afterwards. And those who aren't familiar, it became the Recovery School District. It was a real challenge for the city. The city is still struggling to overcome and figure out how to get back to a public school system. And that's now more than almost 20 years ago. So, but with this event here this evening, I did want to take a moment just to celebrate Laura. This was the building that I had my first interview event, which was meet and greet with both staff, and I think there were some parents involved as well. And when I walked into the building, I could just feel the thing that I was hoping to feel. My daughter's an IB diploma graduate from the Northeast in Fairfax County, and I was so excited to be here because I saw this was our IB school. And so even that first day that I was here, I could feel the presence of international baccalaureate. It's always so hard to say. And I'm excited to see the growth that we've had here at Palmer in the time that I've been here. I think I've been, is it Heighton? Is it, how you say Todd's name? I've been able to sit in his class before as well and just see that really high level of rigor and the way the students are engaged and interactive in really that critical thinking aspect that comes with any advanced opportunities like IB. So I do want to dispel some rumors. I know folks have wondered, now that Principal Disney is retiring, what's the future of IB? We're doubling down. This is a school that I have said, one of my off-collar comments is my goal is that Palmer High School becomes the destination IB diploma school for the Front Range. I was fortunate enough to meet one of our students that actually comes down from Monument that Choice is in. But I'd also like to be able to say that there are kids from Calhoun and kids from Pueblo as well that are coming to be here to be a part of that IB diploma program. So I'm going to, can I make fun of you at all anymore? Is that it? No, I don't want to make fun of you anymore. You want any comments? I'm sure you'll have a big event here. So why don't we open it up for questions since we have such a small audience. While we're doing that, whoever raises their hand, if you haven't grabbed a flyer, please grab them. You'll see some of the things that we're doing to try and accelerate our hiring this year. Matter of fact, when Laura announced her retirement, we realized that we needed to be advertising our principal openings sooner than others in El Paso County, and we were able this year to get the 6 known principal openings advertised by the 3rd week of January. Those interviews are happening right now. If you come over to central office, don't open a closed door because there's probably an interview going on in there. And then also on that sheet, you'll see that we've also accelerated the time that we're posting our other openings within the district, because what we want to be is not just, I talked about Palmer being the premier IB diploma school on the Front Range. We want to be the premier school district on the Front Range as well. And we have to do that by starting to advertise and ensure that we're communicating to educators that District 11 is the heart of the city. Hold on. So there's our little heart of the city. Because we are special. We are 150 years old. We're proud of our history. We are standing in the namesake of General Palmer himself, and he and his wife as the founders of this original school district 150 years ago, standing on excellence. Okay, let's get some questions. Any questions? Because I got other stuff to talk about if you guys don't want to ask me any questions. Okay, great. Thanks, Jessica. And always state your name and where you, how you're affiliated with the district, please.
Jessica Kloppenberg. I'm a kindergarten teacher at Wilson Elementary. So I've had some parents and staff members who have asked, because I know that you are working hard right now to get the calendar for the upcoming school year set, when you are going to be making an official decision on how snow days are going to be handled next year, because some parents and staff were a little frustrated with the change, which they're happy about the decision, but just the fact that they put in all this extra work to prepare for remote learning, and then they didn't have to use any of that material that they prepared. So just when that decision is going to be made.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. So I appreciate the chance for me to show my own humility in adult learning, again, in a public space. When I arrived in District 11, I had remembered a little different way that we felt about snow maybe 20 or 30 years ago, but I also thought that there would be some outcomes from COVID about remote learning that we could carry forward. And again, I was not in an administrative position during COVID. Those were the years that I had in between my time in DC public schools and here. And so I made some false assumptions. I thought that systems would be excited about the opportunity to exercise remote learning from some of the strong things that did happen during COVID. And I have to give a shout out to, it was the students here at Palmer that helped reset that. Now, I certainly heard from a couple of adults during that initial decision making that they weren't sure that that was the soundest decision. I was certainly basing it on what some other districts were doing. I know District 20 has a middle school and high school remote learning policy. Elementary school, normally they don't have that for. I talked to some of the higher ed institutions who had had some success in remote learning and others that did not. But it was the students right here in the student council at Palmer High School who actually did what I hope all of us would do, which is they took a breath, they took their time, they did the research, and they presented it not just to myself, but also to the school board and all of the community that said, first of all, we are the customers, and we're not shying away from learning. We're actually telling you that nothing beats high quality face-to-face learning. So that's my go-in position for next year. Nothing beats high quality face-to-face learning. This year we have 5 days built into the calendar. We've gone through 3 by the 2nd week of February, and certainly somebody else might say to me that we should have had more based upon some of the decisions that we've made as a district. But other than this idea to think that we would have to adjust the calendar, we'll go into next year with no remote learning days planned, and we'll go with the traditional calendar of 5 snow days forecasted, and then we'll again have to make these 4 a.m. struggles on whether or not it's safe to get to school or not. But I appreciate the question and the chance to be an adult learner. Paul?
So again, my name is Paul Blakesley. I have 2 different roles. First role is I'm a parent. My daughter's a first grader at Bristol Elementary School, so I've got a question about that. And then I'm also a staff member here at Palmer High School, so I have a question about that. So starting with the parent one, so my daughter's at Bristol, and we chose Bristol. We don't live in that area. So we chose Bristol because of a lot of the programs that they offer, and we were really excited about it. One of the things that they don't currently offer are before and after school programs. And I know this year a number of elementary schools did implement some after school programs. I'm not sure about before school. So my question is there any plans for as soon as next year to roll out more programs for elementary schools before and after school?
Yep. Thanks, Paul. First of all, thank you for choosing Bristol, a phenomenal school. One of my first meetings with principal and school community was at Bristol during our back to school events. I was so excited to be a part of that evening, and I fell in love with Bristol. My son happens to be a musician, also went through Suzuki 123 back on the East Coast, and when I saw that we had that at Bristol, it just immediately reminded me of the strength that comes from connecting music very early in children's lives. Whether or not your students involved in that or not, I'm not sure, but anytime I can give a plug for the music programs over at Bristol, I'm happy to do it. I want to thank the board for being very specific in programming dollars last year for after-school programs. Let me talk a little bit about after-school programs. They were initially programmed as an enrollment opportunity where we thought about boundary schools, where we lose families to other school districts that may have extended care opportunities. What we found when we did the research was we also saw that we were getting very strong academic gains from having an extended learning opportunity. I'll use Monroe as an example. The Mustang Club at Monroe does both physical and joyful and social emotional as well as academic learning in that after school program. So it's not, a straight 2 hours of tutoring, but kids are able to enjoy several different aspects of an extended learning period. And so then what the board did this year is they doubled down on after school programming in our priority list schools to help be able to reach the academic growth and achievement that we have. So those two things would say that we'll have to work with the board in this year's budget if we believe in after school or before school programming as a requirement for or an opportunity for all schools. And I'll also add that congratulations to Bristol for their accreditation with distinction and performance and an SPF of 94 as the highest performing school, as the DAC reported just at the last board meeting. We did have a school come forward just last week with a plan for before school care. And Brian, was that one of your schools or was it one of Sherry's schools? I think it was Sherry Schools. And so we're working on that planning right now in the budget to see what is that opportunity and have to price it out. And so I'll end that with, if you can get Gabe to come to me, which is the principal at Bristol for those who don't know, or not just to me, but through his area superintendent, and say, this is the thing that I want to distinguish my school with, I'm happy to price it out and then present it to the board as a budget opportunity.
Thank you.
Now, as a staff member.
Yes, as a staff member. So as I know you're aware because of last night's meeting, one of the concerns here at Palmer is the move, what's been presented as moving to a block schedule. And staff, a number of staff here at Palmer are upset about the fact that there was no collaboration in that decision, that our opinion was not asked. I do know that many staff members here actually do like the idea of a block. Many do not. But I think the big issue is we have not been involved in collaboration in any way on that decision. So my question to you is, how are you planning? How is your team planning on reaching out to staff here as well as students and parents here at Palmer to work together on developing a new schedule for next year?
Great. Hi, come on in. Thank you, Paul, for that. And if folks haven't watched the work session last night, it is available online. We also send a summary of the major things that happened out over email. You can read that as well. So there has been a conversation with the high school leaders on what is it that they felt they needed to create and maximize student opportunity in a consistent way across the district. And so uniformly and unanimously, the school leaders came back to administration and said they wanted to go to a common block schedule. So that was presented to the board last night in part of our academic master plan with a focus on high school. What has become clear to central administration is that that's not Principal Disney's dog to walk. That's the district's dog to walk. So I met with my team tonight, this afternoon, as I alluded to last night in my comments, that we will create, I would just call them small facilitated meetings. I think we have used World Cafes before as a way to do that. That includes students, staff, and community members at the high schools. I know particularly Palmer and Doherty, but open it up to any high school. And we're going to complete that before spring break to have a conversation so it feels like, let me be careful, so we are being collaborative. So this is not a final decision. It was a recommendation that came to me that we briefed to the board. So we are still open for conversation, but I did ask the high school principals very specifically, what do you need to accelerate opportunities for students? And I did not ask them to consider block scheduling. I didn't ask them to consider anything. They came back with that as their uniform decision on what they thought would allow us to maximize the resources and opportunities for students. So still an open door for a conversation, but we do want to get to a place where there is equity across the system, where students have equal and equitable access to the resources that, as I had gotten feedback from students, did not exist with the disparity of different ways that schools were using the gift of time. So thank you for that. Hi,
Anton Shulsky, teacher here at Palmer, also IBMYP International Baccalaureate Middle Years Coordinator, and currently serving as the immediate past president for the National Council for the Social Studies. So I'm going to go with that last thing first, and then I'd like to address one other thing real quickly. So one of the things that came out of last night's board meeting was a recommendation that, and by the way, I have to thank some of the members of the board for speaking up against this, is a recommendation to remove U.S. history as a requirement for high school graduation and instead make it a recommendation. And I'm using air quotes. I apologize. I don't do that very often. Where to begin? I certainly don't want to be associated with a district that then has to go out and say, yes, we're the district that is not asking our students to take U.S. history. Given the scope and tenor of our times, given how much our students are, part of what we're supposed to be doing is preparing students not only for college and career, but also for civic life. And the way you prepare students for civic life is you give them the opportunity to fully invest in studying our country's history. Now, can we do a better job at the high schools? Sure, we probably can. But here's part of the issue, and I've raised this on a couple of occasions. Social studies is the only major discipline in this district that does not have a dedicated facilitator for that subject. I'm not a big advocate in saying we need more administrators. That's my teacher hat on. At the same time, and maybe you can appreciate this, and this is not a knock about the individual who is the humanities facilitator. Does an excellent job. Her background is English. It would be as if in your former role in the Air Force, if someone was in charge of a bomber wing, having someone come in to say, well, I flew helicopters, so I now can absolutely take care of this. Yep, it's an aircraft, but it's completely different. And the role is completely different. For us to simply just kick this aside, and granted, there may be opportunities, but the reason we don't have those conversations is we don't have somebody facilitating that conversation, right? When those meetings happen, they happen with English and social studies teachers together. Two different animals, two different discussions. And, we can't be the district that says we're not offering U.S. history as a requirement.
Great.
Okay? So I would urge not only yourself, but others to really have a hard examination at that proposal. That one, to me, says a lot of negative aspects about it.
Yep.
So I'll let you comment on that, and then I've got one other
Sure.
follow-up.
So I think the comment is just to agree. So, I am support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I get the power of why children need to understand what it means when you say that. Well, what is the Constitution and what does it stand for? So as we presented last night, we were presenting ideas that we are thinking about for our high school plan. And it is clear that any one word can become a lightning rod for folks. And the idea was not, we didn't ask for a thumbs up, there was no vote, there was no approval for or disapproval. This was allowing the public to understand that we spent most of the first semester on pre-K strategies and operationalizing best first instruction. I have asked the administrators and the high school leaders to come together to think, what can we now do about high school? And so, yes, and yes one more time, because we certainly heard from the board, we do not want to be the school district that says we don't care about U.S. history. We will correct that, but what we were trying to introduce was our students need more options in their education journey. And so I take those steps specifically because the feedback we're getting is that students are told what they have to take instead of students having an option of the things that are of interest to them. Now, we have an obligation to meet some foundational items for our students, and as we introduced fiscal literacy last night, because we believe that too is a tool that every one of our students should graduate with, we obviously believe strongly that we should make sure we are evaluating and being collaborative in the understanding from esteemed educators like yourself on the importance of U.S. history.
And I'll go back to the personal financial literacy piece. And this is what happens when you're an experienced educator in this district. Because when we started a long time ago, financial literacy was taught in a number of different areas. It was taught in social studies. It was taught in the business department. It was taught in some areas in math. And then, interestingly enough, it was business and math that didn't want to play in that sandbox. And actually, then the personal financial literacy course that we had here was taken off the books because it didn't meet certain NCAA recommendations. And so now it seems like we've come full circle, or we're attempting to come full circle.
Right?
Right?
I think we all struggle from how history repeats itself. It is an iterative process, and we are seeking to continue to learn. But the major piece that we want to move to is ensuring that our students have active choice in their own educational journey and getting ourselves to a demonstration of competency-based learning, of which we think fiscal literacy is a good example of. I would love to be a part of understanding the cross-curricular failures that existed to make sure we don't make them again. But boy, when a kid graduates and doesn't understand revolving debt or what an APR really is or isn't, I'm really happy that they got a 5 on their calculus test, but they're not set up for their first job and their first credit card. So we have to
Totally agree.
I think we're in. Actually, we're in.
We're in
Antoine,
close agreement
so
there
far
on some
we're,
things.
We're in pretty close agreement so
We
far.
are. And now for the other part.
Okay.
The other shoe's going to drop.
And then we're going to share the microphone, right?
Absolutely. So one of the other aspects that Paul was talking about, and I think is also important to note, is that about this time last year, Palmer staff, Palmer students, and Palmer parents all came together to bring into the schedule that we currently have here. So we did our due diligence in the fact that last year surveys went out, teams met, we looked at a number of different iterations of what schedule could look like, and we as a building came together with the support of parents and students to have our current schedule. Now, also things being as they have been, unfortunately, over the last several years, this could, and I say could because again we have it sounds like we have some other steps to take. We run the risk of having like the 5th or 6th different schedule in as many years.
Right.
Granted, some of that was pandemic related, but at some point there's got to be some sense of can we do something for at least a year or 2 or maybe even 3 years in a row to see if it's actually working. To that end, I would love to hear and I don't use this term very often, I'd love to hear some data coming out of Coronado regarding attendance on Mondays, because that's when they currently have their PLC days. And also, how are we going to address the fact that if we do adopt the schedule, I'm saying if, it hasn't been finished yet, how do we address the fact that teachers in particular would lose a minimum of 4 PLC/PD days because of holidays on Mondays. That's an issue that I know for a number of us that would have some consequences.
So I don't want to take up all the time on the common block schedule. We're clearly going to continue to talk about this. What I will just say is we understand that change is hard, and we clearly didn't walk that dog as well as we could have, and I take ownership of that as the superintendent. I got feedback from the high school principals. This is what they want to do. They shared with me that they'd had some high-level conversations with senior representation of our teachers union. We are committed to continuing to have that conversation. I will also add that just because it's built right now as Monday with then the flipping blocks on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, doesn't mean that we wouldn't pay attention to what that means for most of our holidays being on a Monday. So there could be modified Tuesdays like next Tuesday would be. Most of our, well, I should say, all of our holidays are forecast. I can't quite say that all of our inclement weather days are forecast as well. So we look forward to continuing to have the dialogue. And I also agree that we're seeking for stability, but sometimes we're looking at it from a slightly different lens. And the lens that I asked the high school leaders to look at was the portability and modular way that students could benefit from multiple experiences in the district, not just their comprehensive high school. And so that, I think, became the tipping point, which was, oh, I guess I can give up the work of, as you shared, that Palmer had done last year to ensure that Palmer students could get the benefits of what we offer at Wasson and at Pikes Peak State College and other relationships that we're developing the same way that other schools do. So I believe that this is a yes and conversation, and I really look forward to the chance that we'll be able to talk more deeply about it. Thank you, Anton. We have some newcomers as well, so if you just have any questions, we'll hand you the microphone and you're good to go. Hi, Mike.
Hi. Hi, Mike. How you
Hi, Mike.
doing? We met beforehand. I'm Mike Ferguson, and my wife and I, our main tie to Palmer is our kids went here about 20 years ago, and I was telling Mike I can remember as a little kid growing up on the west side. That was before Coronado was built. I knew the Palmer fight song, went to the games, so it even goes back that far. But you were sharing a little bit about your vision really for Palmer. You mentioned about the IB, and I was wondering where do you see Palmer like a year from now, 3 years from now, and to the end of the decade?
Yeah.
What's your vision for that?
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and thanks again for continuing to be supporters of Palmer, even though it was last year your kids graduated, right? Graduating class 2022. Like I said, Palmer's my home school because I live right down the road, and it just is very natural and comfortable for me to be in an IB school again. I want to talk a little bit about IB. There are two things that I think an IB school can be. It can be a school within a school, which is fine when that happens, because you'll have very direct choice for students to say, I seek the rigor that comes from the IB diploma experience, and they step into almost a whole different world within a school. That's great when that happens. And how many kids do we have that will graduate with a diploma this year? 37. So, it would be great to be able to say 37, 50, 75 in 3 years. Like, I would love to see us double that number in 5 years. But the real gift of an IB diploma school for me is what I just call when a building reeks. And I use that word because reek sometimes has a negative connotation. An IB diploma school for me reeks of excellence. It reeks of critical thinking. It reeks of children who understand and want to have deep dialogue on the difference between a truth and a fact. And that level of conversation coming from teenagers is exactly what gets them coming up. There were 8 or 12 of them that came forward with, we did the research and we don't think remote learning days are a good thing for us given the experience that we've had through COVID and our desire over the next year. So that to me is this idea of having, you don't have to be an IB diploma student to be in a building where you feel that you have that agency, where you're an active learner in your own journey. So to me, from an academic perspective, this becomes the place where it's always an opportunity to talk to the student council at Palmer. You never know what you're going to get because they're constantly iterating and giving us feedback on their own system. So they become active in their journey instead of being, as we see with some of our students now, being passive in their own experience. And that's where we start to lose kids. They go on the slippery slope. When I think about the physical nature of Palmer, again, I live downtown, and one of the things I get quoted for all the time is you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a crane downtown. Every time I turn a corner, there's a new apartment building coming up. There's a new building. There's a new restaurant opening. There is a ton of development in the downtown corridor. And as I make my runs in the morning, David, are you here? Where are you? So David Allison is here. We met one morning at the 7-Eleven, which the field's that way, right? So we met at the 7-Eleven down there because there had been a shooting at the 7-Eleven. And so David and his team with the Palmer team were doing a great job of making sure kids could transit back and forth and be safe. And those were most of my talking points tonight were going to be on safety. I cannot accept the fact that our children have to go 2.5 blocks down for PE and run the risk of being shot at a 7-Eleven in a downtown corridor where you can go have a 4 or 5-star meal and have a great time on a Friday and a Saturday night. So I want to complete the corridor, and if you look at the way Old North End is flipped, you know, you can't buy a house for under $1 million off of Wasatch once you get north of Uinta. We need to complete this corridor. The park has just opened. I think it's time for the community to consider what would be a reconfigured Palmer High School. We don't have a bond. I don't have approval to say any of those things. But I think General Palmer would love to see a 4-story building that's glass on all sides that you could see Pikes Peak from any corridor, no matter where you were in the building. And build a Palmer High School that was ready for Colorado Springs 2050, not one that was always just thinking about 1872. So I have big visions for what I think a downtown high school could and should be. And I think if we could get the city and other agencies to go in on a public-private partnership, we have 3 lots right now that exist. And I think there's a different way for us to configure that would better serve our students in the future. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Allie Eustace, and I am a parent of a Palmer student and also a teacher here. Palmer has a history of inclusivity, of being a safe place for all of our students, many, many years of LGBTQ plus rights and inclusivity, and I'm wondering, I've heard lately from the board some discriminatory remarks from some members, and I'm wondering what you're doing to support our kids that need that support and to keep Palmer that place in the future.
Yes, the place. I like
the
it.
Place
the
for
place.
those kids.
Allie, what do you teach here? Spanish, thank you. That's right, I think we met upstairs. So I'm going to comment on my own position. I won't comment on the board. So Allie, Ian, and Steve, thanks for being here. My son's name is Ian, so it's very easy for me to remember that. We're the district that is here to serve all children. We cannot discriminate against anything, race, gender, religion, size, belief, politics. We have to be a school system that is accepting of all children. We have to acknowledge that, and this is, I call this the turn the music down quote, every generation is going to press the generation in front of it. The generation, my own children, I have 3 children, have completely different lifestyles than I thought were even possible when I was their age. We have to be a school district that is accepting of that without question. And we have to give both equitable and equal supports across the board to however it is that children present themselves and the supports that they need. I believe we're doing that right now. I don't get into board politics as a non-political position. I know that I'm hired by a board that may be seen as being political or not, but I believe in the apolitical nature of the educator. Our job is to be there no matter what our students say. And I think, you know, as I would share, there were some conversations here at Palmer of some challenges on the way some students were writing some essays. And we've tried to stand in a space that said, we've looked at this, and although you might not be comfortable with that language, we don't think that it's an actual challenge to our ability to operate a safe school for everyone. So I think, well, I won't say I think, I know that Palmer is the place, and we seek for all our buildings to be the place. Thank you. Has everyone met our CAO, Tamara Acevedo? Say hi, Tamara. I'm going to introduce the staff that's here as well, for those who don't know. Does everybody know John McCarron, Chief of IT and Security? Say hi. Everybody know Brian Relic? I know you all know Brian Relic. I got the funniest picture of Brian Relic on the wall today at Keller Elementary School. You were the principal there, apparently. And so he had quite the facial hair. That must have been circa 1995 or something like that. Yes, it was great. We have Chief Bailey in the back, leads our professional support services and HR. Chris Odom's our Chief Operating Officer. Terry is the one who saves the day every day here for facilities, custodians, as well as transportation as well. Have I missed anybody else that's here? Nicole. And Nicole helps us on strategy all day long. She is a brilliant, and an accomplished educator herself, third grade teacher. We got to hear her third grade voice today in a cabinet meeting. Made me sit down. I sat right down. What do I got over there? Oh, and of course our Chief of Communications, Deborah Ashby.
Two guys over there.
What's
Rex
that?
and
Did I
Justin.
miss some? And our team over here, Rex and Justin. Thanks, keeping us live. Okay. Any more questions? If not, I'm gonna use the gift of time. Yes, please.
So we are, I will be headed down to Earp's Gym, a block and a half down the hill. Be careful at the 7-Eleven. Coach Shackelford, who retired last year, is coaching his last home game tonight. And so immediately following the game, they will be doing a recognition of all of his years. And it's interesting because I started out teaching at Harrison High School, and when I was at Harrison High School, Dave Shackelford was also there. So when I came to Palmer and rejoined, we've traveled in all the same circles, all us educators. So if you have the time, join us down at the gym.
And Principal Disney told me she was going to dunk when she gets down there too. So you're going to dunk. Great. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Michael.gall@d11.org if you ever have any questions.